Remember that time when you were ripping your chest hairs out after Iron Man passed away? Remember when you had boogers running down your mustache at the beginning of Up? Remember when you cried when the dog passed away in Marley and Me? I'm sorry if I ruined any of those movies for anybody, but at this point you should have watched all of them, or at least two of them. But anyways, multiply that feeling by like 100 because I'm about to hit you guys with a ton of bricks. I don't know if that many people have covered this particular topic or this groundbreaking news. Maybe somebody already has, but honestly, I haven't seen anything about it on YouTube. And in today's video, I'm going to kind of break down exactly what this means for the action figure collecting community and what this could mean for the future of the community, not just for Diamond Select toys, but just in general. And credit where credit is due, I believe Bleeding Cool was the first to cover this particular subject. However, since then, I have seen a number of different sources, a number of different websites that have essentially confirmed that Diamond Select Toys is no more. They fired most of the team, they disbanded it, and well, we will not be receiving any more Diamond Select Toys. Now, as of the moment of this recording, I think I went on the website, and this is, a few days prior to me actually uploading it, but I did check and everything was still you could actually still pre-order stuff from the website if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to assume, and again, just pure assumption, that they may still ship out some stuff, like maybe stuff that's already in production or is already post-production. They probably just need to ship it over from overseas and, just package it or whatever the case may be and then distribute it from their warehouses. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not an insider, but I think there could still be a trickle down effect from these figures. We could still see a pretty good quantity either going directly to the consumer or to some of the retailers. Only time will tell exactly how all of this is going to play out. In my personal opinion, if you do have something pre-ordered, just be on the lookout for that email. They could actually cancel your pre-orders, and if you're somebody that's interested in something that is from Diamond Select, I would probably go through another avenue just because maybe some retailers might have some stuff in stock, but I probably wouldn't order anything from the Diamond Select toy store because some of these might actually be canceled in the foreseeable future. Now, if I'm being brutally honest with you guys, I wasn't a huge fan of the Diamond Select toys line, and I'll include Marvel Select in there because they were just horrendous looking figures. From time to time, you would get some like great sculpts, great paint apps, great, accessories, but that's not what I want my action figures to do. Like, I want them to get into crazy poses. The mid-ab articulation was absolutely awful for the most part. Some of these figures still had like single jointed elbows and single jointed knees. The ankles were absolutely awful. The articulation for the head was just non-existent, and then no butterfly joint. So, like, I get it. There is a fan base out there for these. There's definitely people out there that collected them, but I'm just not one of those people that likes to, display their action figures in an upright pose, and that's usually what you get with Diamond Select in general. So I just wasn't a huge fan of them. I do own a few figures here and there, and I do own some of their diorama / statues. Those display incredibly well. There's a ton of detail, great sculpt work, but the figures, I just wasn't a huge fan of them. However, it is still sad to see this line go. As I said before, they were working on some pretty good franchises. Not only Marvel, they did have the War Machine and I believe the Hobgoblin up for pre-order, Deadpool, Wolverine, a few other figures from the Marvel Universe, but they had stuff like Tron, for example, Lord of the Rings. They were even working on the Walking Dead line. So there's definitely a following for this manufacturer, and unfortunately, they're just not going to be around anymore. Now, we know that the Diamond Distribution, the actual company, I should say, Diamond Select Toys was like a little branch of Diamond Distributions, and, Diamond Distributions is still going to exist. They've been bought after declaring bankruptcy. However, the Diamond Select Toys is what will not continue. So I'm not sure if some of those people that were not fired from the Diamond Select Toys branch, maybe they crossed over to work on Diamond Distribution. If I'm not mistaken, they're the ones that also distribute comic books. I could be wrong on that. I don't really follow too much of Diamond personally, but I think that's what I remember when I used to collect comic books more consistently. Having said all of that, I think this is going to create a little bit of a wave in the community. And look, I hate to, bring this back to the whole tariff situation, but we just can't turn a blind eye to this. Like, there's definitely going to be ramifications. And I will say, maybe that was, the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe that was, the cherry on top of the icing, as they say. maybe this was kind of like the final problem that they ran into that ultimately made them declare bankruptcy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know that for certain, but that could be a pretty good possibility, because let's not forget they started to have a lot of financial problems before the whole tariff situation, but they declared bankruptcy during that whole entire turmoil, during that entire mess. I think maybe that was just kind of like too much for them to handle, and they just couldn't absorb any of those costs. But I've been preaching this for quite some time. Get used to it. This is going to happen, I think, a lot more consistently within the next few months, whether it's price increases or small little companies just going out of business. They just can't absorb any of these tariff costs. Not only that, if a lot of people are speculating, people that don't know anything about, action figure manufacturing, which by the way, I know very little about as well, but I've done a little bit of research, and we've seen now a lot of people that are in the inside being actually interviewed, and a lot of these people say that it's just near impossible to move production to, whether it's in the States or to another country, just because of how expensive it is to move all of that stuff. Not to mention the facilities just aren't up to par to what we're used to from China. So again, this is pure speculation. We don't know this for a fact, but it seems like you're either going to have to spike up your prices the way that Jada Toys and Hasbro and everybody else has been doing, or you're just going to be going completely out of business. And I think, and by the way, Diamond Distributions is still alive, which makes me believe that whoever bought Diamond Distribution just didn't see the Diamond Toys line being viable long term. They just didn't feel like the profit margins were great, and maybe the tariffs definitely played a huge role in that. So, we already saw Jada Toys, and as great as Jada Toys has been, they're a very small manufacturer, and you see that impact on them. They have now increased all of their Street Fighter action figures. Their normal $25 price point, I think, has now spiked up to $30. Even their Tony the Tiger, I believe, was available at $30. Their Scooby-Doo line is now $30, and there are some rumors out there, I think these are unconfirmed, but Hasbro is supposed to be giving us one more price hike. I believe their regular Marvel Legends line could be going up to as much as like $28 to $30. Same thing with G.I. Joe Classifieds. Same thing with, any other line that is under Hasbro. I believe even the Star Wars Vintage line was going to get a little bit of a markup. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, this is the final straw. I'm not going to collect action figures in general. I'm just going to cut back. But this could have, like I said, a really long lasting effect within the community, within the people that collect action figures. And I think we're going to get to that point. Diamond Select Toys was, one of those marquee companies that was always around manufacturing action figures based on beloved franchises. And to see them go out of business, that just makes me believe that all of these small companies are going to be in a very tough situation where they either, spike up their prices or they just completely go out of business. And I think we're going to start to see it with the lower end first. We've already seen Jada Toys quietly increase their prices, and I don't think it's going to stop there. I believe Hasbro and McFarlane will probably try to hold out as much as they possibly can, but eventually they are businesses at the end of the day, and they have to have a profit on the back end. And there's only so much of this whole tariff nonsense that they can absorb. So at the end of the day, that's essentially what I wanted to talk about here. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on the whole Diamond Select situation, and then get the ball rolling when it comes down to talking about the smaller manufacturers that could potentially go out of business. Let me know your thoughts down below. What line do you guys feel is in jeopardy? Are you okay with the price hikes? Will you be able to continue to collect moving forward? I'm very curious to see where the community stands on this news. It's pretty heartbreaking. As I said, I wasn't a huge fan of the line, but it's still sad to see one of the big marquee lines go down this way. But as always, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. I'm very curious to see what the community has to say as a whole. So let me know your thoughts down below. Are you guys excited about the future? Are you very pessimistic? Very curious to see the consensus overall. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling action figure content, make sure to stay tuned. We're doing it pretty consistently. I think we're uploading at least one video on a daily basis. I thoroughly enjoy putting these together for you guys. Stay safe out there and make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. Pose your figures, photograph them, whatever it is that you do to enjoy these, and stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.